see. I noticed during one of your prayers that you crossed from right to left. And the question that left to right for Catholics. Yeah. Okay, so what happened with that is Latin Rite. Nice. So the Catholic Church has different rites. There are different rites in the church. A rite consists of a liturgical rite, well, not just comprising the liturgy only, but also comprising their own canon law, their own liturgical, doctrinal, and canonical. So, like, for example, you have Byzantine Catholics. In fact, here I can pull up different rites, just so I can list some here. And I am building up to answering your question, but I think it might make more sense if different rites, man. All it wants to do is answer about man, Google is worthless. Oh. I may have typed in there. Okay, so there are rites of the Catholic Church, so click here. So we have the Latin Rite, which is typical of what we think in terms of like the Latin Mass. There's the Byzantine Rite, there's the Alexandrian Rite, the Armenian, the Maronite, the Chaldean, the Syro-Malabar. Those are some examples, right? So I used to attend a Byzantine Catholic church in my area before I started attending the Latin Mass consistently. The Byzantine Rite is very similar to that of like the Greek Orthodox, for instance. Byzantine meaning from like Byzantium, right, which was the name of Constantinople before it was changed to Constantinople. It was called Byzantium, and this became the seat of the Roman Empire in the East, right? It is the liturgy of St. John Christostem. And in the East, in their devotional liturgical practices, they go from right to left, right? And not only that, they put these two fingers down, and they put these three fingers together. The three persons of the Trinity, the two natures of Christ, and you sign yourself in that manner, ending over top of the heart. Right? So that's what I do. And I've done that since I have some of that influence from the Byzantine Rite in the Catholic Church. So they're all Catholics. So you could say that I was an Eastern Rite Catholic. I never officially joined the particular church, but I was fascinated by some of the doctrinal and canonical and liturgical distinctives of the Byzantine Rite. For instance, children are given communion from the earliest of ages, so they don't have to wait until confirmation occurring later in life. In fact, a child would receive all three. They would receive the baptism, they would receive confirmation, and they would receive their first Eucharist. And they would continue to receive the Eucharist. There isn't a baptize, no Eucharist. You know, maybe when you're like 8 or 9 or whatnot, you become confirmed, and then you begin taking the Eucharist. There isn't that timeline separation that's taking place in the Eastern rites. That's something that ended up occurring in the West. I kind of like the Eastern more. I like the idea of not withholding confirmation and being able to have immediate and continual access to the Eucharist. I like that. I think that that's nice. Obviously, the Byzantine doesn't use the Latin; they use Greek. Right? Yeah. Not only that, the East also has unique doctrinal expressions. All right, so for instance, in the West, and end up giving shape to the Latin Rite and Roman theology, the language of original sin, for example. Augustine in the West, who wrote in Latin, was very influential in the West. So the language or the doctrine of original sin was very influential and gave shape to the ongoing theology in the West, whereas Augustine did not have the same kind of influence in the East. So the language of original sin isn't quite the way that the East would express it, right? There are doctrinal expressions that are slightly different. So in the East, you may find certain ideas such that the fear of death, all right, that we die and the subsequent fear of death is what leads all men subsequently to sin, as opposed to thinking in terms of sanctifying grace, another expression and doctrinal distinctive that's not used in the East, right? Whereas sanctifying grace is a created grace, all right, something that a person, a kind of created intermediary between man and God. The East conceptualized things more in terms of uncreated grace. The energy, it makes an energy essence distinction within God, and so we are participating in the energies of God, but distinct from His essence. So in each case, there's a kind of doctrinal intermediary, for instance, and how both the East and West try to conceptualize how God and man can relate and meet in the middle, so to speak. Because of that, the East doesn't have the kind of, we were deprived of sanctifying grace and this is the essence of original sin and so on and so forth. So that it's not as it's not formulated in the same sort of way, but the core essence of the distinctions are slightly different. So not only is there language differences, when you look at some of these other rites, they may have things that are very unique to them. Like for example, if you went to an Eastern Rite Catholic church, you would find that it's predominantly has icons, for instance. So it has what is called the Iconostasis, that is separating the altar from the people. All right, and the Iconostasis is like just a wall with a couple doors, but it's just filled with iconography, right? It's like an icon shield. All right, that's the English translation for iconostasis, and which is a continual reminder that what is going on and at the altar and what the priest is doing and everything is a participation in the heavenly worship. And in fact, it's not in the East. It's not called Mass. It's called Divine Liturgy. Right. Another difference is that the East uses leavened bread, and they actually, instead of giving the bread and the wine separate, they actually sprinkle the wine on the leavened bread. So the leavened bread soaks in the flavor of the wine, and so they have a spoon, right? So that they spoon it into your mouth like that. So you're actually receiving body and blood all at once together, which is kind of neat. I liked that. In the West, they actually separated the blood and the wine. If I understand correctly, it was occasioned by a particular heresy that started to spread, and that they were addressing this heresy through praxis. So the understanding of transubstantiation that takes place with the blood and the wine is the doctrine of concomitance. All right, that the blood, the wine is turned into the blood, but the rest of Christ is concomitantly present along with the blood. And likewise, the bread becomes the body, but the rest of Christ is concomitantly present with the body. So that when you receive under either species, you are receiving the whole Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity, who is really, truly, and substantially present under the appearances of bread and wine. So in giving of just the bread, in praxis, they were able to eliminate the theological error that you were only receiving a part of Christ, and you had the error was that you had to receive both the blood and the wine in order to receive both. Otherwise, you'd just be receiving one or the other. For instance, I forget what that particular heresy was called, but this continued to be a practice in the West. Once again, just like the separating of confirmation and delaying the Eucharist, the separating of the blood and the wine is occasioned by practical matters. So there aren't strict doctrinal, strict adherence to that, well, this can't be done, or this can't be done, or that can't be done. So in the different rites, there are just different practices that were influenced by certain historical events or occasions of heresy that led to a kind of practical change to address those things. So so to go back to your question, I got into the habit of just simply always ending it over top of my heart. Now, what's interesting is, so another way of looking at this is the idea of whether or not, let me see, we are mirroring or mimicking the priest when he does the blessing, right? Are we mirroring his motions, or are we mimicking his motions? Both are fine. In the Latin Rite, I think we are mirroring. I think. Yeah, it might. I don't know. I have to look it up again, but in the Byzantine Rite, there's a mimicking or mirroring, and then so on and so forth, which makes sense. You're either following the movements of the priest hand, or you're doing the exact same motions as the priest hand. I haven't brought myself to bring about any sort of change. I just still continue to use the theological meaning of the holding of the hand, and it's probably always going to be that way now. I don't care to change it, I guess, just for the sake of conformity. But very interesting observation there. There's always a rich explanation to explaining these things. And of course, one of the things I actually like about the Catholic Church is that there are all of these different rites, because I've seen 3 rites so far. In fact, the church that I went to at first, it was called Holy Apostles. It was out in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And as an ecumenical move, they had a side chapel where they kept the tabernacle. And one Sunday a month, they would invite a non-Chalcedonian rite. All right, so I actually thought this was a good idea in my opinion, at least. So the Fourth Ecumenical Council of Chalcedon or Chalcedon, I honestly don't know how it's said. I end up just saying both. There was a minor split that occurred in the church with the Patriarch of Alexandria, I believe it was. And they became the non-Chalcedonian, meaning they only maintained the first 3. So there was a schism here, a lesser well-known schism, but they're referred to as the Oriental Orthodox. But I remember one, it may have been on a Saturday or something. I don't remember if it was like Sunday evening, but I was waiting for confession, and in the small chapel, I don't know exactly what the language was, but it was like Egyptian or something, and it was the singing was very fascinating. And I think later on you had the Patriarchate of Moscow, which I guess I heard recently there's some conflicts between Constantinople and Moscow now, in terms of who is going to be the first among equals, in the East, for instance. Anyways, yeah, it's really neat. Anytime I get the chance to observe a different rite in the church, I definitely want to participate and check out the prayers, see what's the same. I might not be able to follow along as easily, because unless they have an English translation next to what they're doing, because they're using all these different ancient languages, and it's just really neat to listen to the prayers and the liturgical movements, the garbs, everything is just different and culturally influenced, and so on and so forth, to see how these different rites kind of organically and separately grew and developed, where it represents a variety of styles of worship within a single Catholic Church. Normally when people think of Catholic Church, they think Latin Rite, but really the Catholic Church has all of these different rites to it, and I think we would all be greatly enriched to participate in those when there is time and opportunity, for sure. But most excellent question, and you're very welcome. I actually enjoyed explaining all of that